What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. This video is refresh gimmicks that saved careers. So wrestling gimmicks that saved careers, I'm guessing. Yeah, this was suggested by a handful of people, so thank you guys. I'm guessing you all want to really see this video, so me to react to this video. So thank you for the suggestions. If you have any other suggestions, please put them in the comment section below or on my post on my channel. And yeah, let's get into it.
Sometimes a great wrestler can get caught in a gimmick that is no longer working for them. It's happened to some of the best performers out there, and whenever this does happen, it usually means a character refresh is required. Sure, not everyone's able to achieve that refresh, but for those who do, they find them turning into an absolute career saver. But what are the biggest examples?
Hold on 1 second, y'all. And we are back. Sorry for that.
In wrestling history? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at right now, starting with the head of the table himself, Roman Reigns. Yes, it's long been a talking point amongst wrestling fans that post-breakup of the Shield, Roman Reigns just wasn't working out as the top guy WWE wanted him to be. No, with a white meat babyface character that few fans believed in, combined with a push that felt forced at times, it felt like he could end up turning into this generation's version of Lex Luger. But that wouldn't be the case forever, because it was in 2020, after taking time away to look after his health at the start of the worldwide shutdown, that the big dog allegedly made some demands to his boss about a potential return. And those demands were no more babyface character. No, instead he wanted to become the biggest heel out there. Obviously then, Reigns got his way here, as when he did return, he'd immediately morph into the head of the table, megalomaniacal leader of the bloodline. And that would see him suddenly get over with fans in a big way. So over would he get, in fact, he'd truly become the centerpiece of WWE television for the first time, as he embarked upon a 1,316-day long run as undisputed WWE Universal Champion. Hell, throughout the early 2020s, there was no single figure in WWE who was more important to the show. And
bro said the early 2020s, bro. Oh my gosh.
And this has gotten him to a level now where he's pretty much the modern
We're more than halfway through.
day version of John Cena at his peak. Even now that his title reign is over, Reigns remains
Just, oh my gosh. Bro, we're almost in the late 2020s. That is crazy.
one of the top, if not the top guy on SmackDown, right up there alongside Cody Rhodes. And that's not a situation which
Time
looks like it's
flies
going
fast.
to change anytime soon. Now, as far as character refreshes go, this has to be one of the most successful of all time. But Roman Reigns isn't the only big star of the PG era who found himself undergoing a career revival after changing things up. No, the exact same thing can be said about our next subject, the woman who went from Irish dancer to last kicker, Becky Lynch. Yes, Becky Lynch's original character when she first debuted back in 2013 was pretty bad, to say the least. Come on now, the Limerick native came jigging out to the ring like a cast member of Riverdance. Yes, the idea here was that Becky would play up to her Irish heritage by decking herself out in green and dancing her way towards freedom pre-match. The only thing it was missing, in fact, was a leprechaun by her side. Needless to say then, when this character was put out to pasture soon thereafter and Lynch was reborn as the last kicker, it all felt a lot more enjoyable to watch. But then, how couldn't it? Because in the last kicker you had someone who was a serious fighter, a wrestler who you believed could win a match and even earn a title, something which Becky eventually did after arriving on SmackDown a few years later.
Dang.
And once she did that, it was off to the races as she became one of the most beloved babyfaces in WWE. Sure, this wouldn't be her peak. No, her peak would come in 2018 when she transformed again, this time into The Man, a PG-era WWE Women's Division equivalent of Stone Cold Steve Austin. But we might never have gotten to that point if she didn't transform into the last kicker first, and in the process, give us a taster of what she could really be when she wasn't being asked to do a dance mid-match. Seriously now, think about how jarring it would have felt if Becky came out one day doing a Kaylee dance, and then the next day decked in black leather. It would have been whiplash-inducing, to say the least. So we're glad we got that middle period in which she was able to truly find herself. As she's no doubt happy she got this last kicker run too, because
Hold on, I'll be right back. Sorry for the interruption. We are back.
as it stands today, Becky Lynch is still one of the top stars in all of women's wrestling. But what about another woman? This time over in AEW, someone who went from 80s rocker to timeless movie star, Toni Storm. That's right, if you've been watching AEW,
I will say, yeah, her gimmick or persona in the early years of her wrestling career was kind of
you over the last year or two,
it was kind of too
then
much.
You'll know all too well that Timeless Toni Storm is one of the best things going in the promotion. But things weren't always at quite this level for the New Zealand-born star. No, back in the early 2020s, following an unsuccessful run on the WWE main roster, she was considering retiring altogether. Even when she ended up signing with AEW in March of 2022, it wasn't as if Toni was a made woman on screen quite yet. No, while she would find success, even winning the AEW Women's World title on 2 occasions, her gimmick was not great, mostly because she was a part of the Outcasts trio made up of her, Saraya, and Ruby Soho, something which never really got over with fans. But then something happened. After losing the world title to Hikaru Shida in the summer of that year, Toni Storm started to undergo a mental break of sorts, and this led to her coming to the belief that she was an old Hollywood movie starlet in the vein of a Grace Kelly or a Katharine Hepburn. Obviously then, this could have been a disaster if done badly, but Toni bought into it so much and proved to be so genuinely funny in the role, it became a huge hit and turned her into the biggest star in that company's women's division. So big a star would she become, in fact, she's since gone on to hold the AEW Women's World title 2 more times, all while having one of the best storylines that promotion has produced alongside Mariah May. And it all happened because she decided to forget about the Motley Crue inspired gimmick she was doing before and instead go with something that was a lot more timeless. But let's head back over to WWE for our next subjects. Who are we talking about here? Why, the New Day, of course. That's right, while the New Day were by no means failing with their original gimmick of 3 pop culture aficionados who just so happened to be legitimate best friends, they were starting to get a little stale by the time 2025 came around. Yes, by that point it was clear that there was little juice left in the squeeze for the incarnation they were in at the time, with this being why everyone involved realized that it was time for a refresh. The only question was, what would this refresh entail, especially as Big E was still on the injury shelf, with there being no timetable for his return to the ring? Well, as it turned out, the answer to that question was a heel turn which would use Big E's injury in the sense that both Kofi and Xavier would blame him for abandoning them, as they from there proceeded to, at least temporarily, kick him out of the group. Understandably then, this was a move which drew nuclear heat from fans at the time, and it made the New Day instantly feel fresh in a way which they hadn't been for years. So fresh would they feel, in fact, when they won the tag team titles for a 13th time soon thereafter, it didn't feel like wheel spinning. No, it felt like they had something new to offer now, and that's exactly why they remain champions as of the time of this video's recording, with them still going strong on account of the refresh their switch to the dark side has afforded them. Sure, we don't imagine this villainous run will last forever. No, the likelihood is that before all is said and done, the New Day will be babyfaces again, possibly after Big E is one day cleared to return to action once more. For now, though, they're going to continue to see how far they can go with this modern incarnation they've found themselves in. And they're not the only stable on WWE TV who's trying to make the most out of a recent rebrand right now, as the same could be said for our next subjects over on SmackDown, the Wyatt Six. Now, to tell the story of the Wyatt Six, we first have to tell the story of Bray Wyatt, one of the more popular characters of PG-era WWE, who tragically passed away in 2023 at the age of 36. Before his passing, though,
I heard about his passing. Rest in peace, Bray Wyatt.
He was working a gimmick where he was being haunted by a mysterious figure known as Uncle Howdy, a figure who was being played by his real-life brother, Bo Dallas. But before the full mysteries of the storyline could be unveiled, his life would come to an untimely end. So, looking to honor his fallen sibling then, in the months after Bray's death, Bo Dallas began making plans about how to keep Uncle Howdy going as a character. And this eventually led to both him and the WWE creative team creating the Wyatt Six. Who were the Wyatt Six? Well, they were a collective of people who felt like they'd been underappreciated before, and were now joining together in tribute to the ultimate underappreciated wrestler of his time. Obviously then, this meant a gimmick rebrand for everyone involved. But that was a good thing because it wasn't like any of the members were setting the world on fire prior to this. No, with Eric Rowan being out of a job, Dexter Lumis and Nikki Cross getting lost in the mid-card, and Joe Gacy floundering on NXT, each of these men and women were in desperate need of a lifeline. And this was something Bo Dallas, now working under the name of Uncle Howdy, was able to offer them, as on the June 17th, 2024 episode of Raw, they'd make an instant impact by laying waste to the gorilla position backstage. And though we've seen some ups and downs since this point, it finally now looks like everyone on the team is healthy and ready to go, with them currently staking their claim at taking the tag team titles over on SmackDown. Will they get these belts? Almost certainly at some point, and once that happens, they'll be able to say they did it in tribute to the fallen 6th member of their group, the one who only remains with us today in spirit. After that, well, who knows what'll happen after that. Maybe Bo Dallas will go after some singles gold, and maybe he'll even win this too. But what about another member of the Rotunda family who's also saved his
Which was the best rebranding in your guys' opinion?
career with a character change? Doesn't he deserve to be looked at in
Because we've gone through, well, 4 already.
this
Well,
video
which
as
one's
well?
the
Why,
best?
yes, he does, and that's why our next subject is Mike Rotunda, the man who found greater success in WWF as IRS. Now, again, like with the New Day pre-heel turn, it wasn't like Mike Rotunda found no success during his early days. No, he actually did quite a lot, with him being a member of both the US Express and the Varsity Club at different points, and as a result, a 2-time tag team champion in WWF. That said, in the 80s, there was only so far you were going to go in Vince McMahon's promotion if you didn't have a colorful gimmick. And this was why he realized he needed to come up with one as more and more time went on and he started to slip back down the card. What would that gimmick eventually be? Well, it would be Irwin R. Shyster, or IRS for short. That's right, this one was a parody of an evil taxman, and it worked gangbusters because even now in 2025, more so than his runs as a varsity athlete, it's IRS which Rotunda is most closely associated with. But then why wouldn't it be, as it happened right when WWF was still in the midst of its golden era, one of the most popular mainstream periods the industry's ever seen. And it wasn't like Irwin R. Shyster was just some throwaway mid-card character here either. No, he'd get plenty of screen time alongside his tag team partner, Ted DiBiase. Yes, in one of the more obvious pairings in wrestling history, it was decided that the evil millionaire in the $1 Million Man and the evil taxman in IRS would make for a great heel duo as, let's be honest, who doesn't hate people like them? And that would push Mike Rotunda to a point of relevance where he'd win the tag team titles on 3 further occasions. Sure, by the time the mid-90s came around, the character would have run its course and he'd make the jump over to WCW instead to play the legally distinct VK Wall Street. But that wouldn't stop IRS from making periodic cameo returns in New York as the decades went on, something he continues to do to this day. As you can imagine then, this is something he's very glad for, as it's unlikely Mike Rotunda, one half of the US Express, would hold the same nostalgic interest for fans in 2025, and it's equally as unlikely he'd be getting calls to come in for things like Legends Night on Raw. Yes, Irwin R. Shyster was the best thing that ever happened to the St. Petersburg native, and he wasn't the only person from back in the day who had things completely turn around for them following a change of character. No, if we look at our next subject, we'll find a very similar story playing itself out. That's right, it's time for us to talk about Tommy Dreamer and his transformation into the innovator of violence. That's right, back in the early days of the Philly-based promotion, when it was still known as Eastern Championship Wrestling, Tommy Dreamer's gimmick was very different. Yes, rather than be portrayed as a hardcore icon here, he was instead very much presented as the pretty boy white meat babyface type. And while this might have worked out okay for him initially, once things got more extreme as the mid-90s rolled around, that character became
I apologize if I don't know any of these people.
very passé.
I mean, I know Bray Wyatt, I know Roman Reigns, and Becky Lynch.
For the audience
so
who
I
are
know
watching, how would the Yonkers native combat this? Well, he'd move with the times and decide to give his character a grittier edge.
I just don't know the older.
During his feud with the Sandman, where he
wrestlers.
was memorably caned across the back multiple times in the middle of the ring after losing a match. That's right, there are a lot of things you can fake in wrestling, but getting whipped repeatedly with a kendo stick is not one of those things. So with every strike Tommy took here, fans knew it was very real and very painful, and this led to them developing a respect for him that they never had before. Obviously then, once Dreamer had that respect, he was a made man and was able to become one of the faces of ECW going forward. Come on now, if you think about Paul Heyman's Renegade Company today, the innovator of violence is going to be one of the first names you think of. He's easily a part of the Mount Rushmore of that promotion. No, he might never have found the success someone like a Rob Van Dam did in WWE, and he may never have had the longevity of the Dudley Boys, but Tommy Dreamer remains a cornerstone of ECW. And the way he did this was by knowing when to mix things up and drop the pretty boy gimmick he'd been playing before in favor of something which was a lot more in keeping with the times and a lot more in touch with the audience in attendance. Really, if you look back on ECW today and think of all the crazy men who were a part of that roster, we're talking about people like Sabu, the Sandman, Taz, Raven, and Terry Funk, just to name a few here. It's amazing that Tommy was able to stand out as much as he did, as by all rights he should have been someone who got lost in the shuffle. But then we guess that's the power of a great gimmick refresh. And the innovator of violence wasn't the only one who benefited from this during the 90s. No, for another example of that, allow us to introduce you to our next subject, Brian Pillman, the man who shook the wrestling world to its core when he transformed into the loose cannon. Yes, when it comes to work shoots like the pipe bomb promo, Brian Pillman is pretty much the godfather of all this.
Oh my gosh.
It wasn't always that way for him. You know, back in the early 90s, he was very much a white meat babyface character, albeit one who was a very good wrestler.
Was that editing mistake from them?
Found plenty of success during his tag team run with a young Steve Austin. But
That threw me off so much, man.
And Pillman figured out something totally
What?
new. A character which was going to blur the lines of reality and fiction in a way that no one else had before in the post-kayfabe era. And that character was the loose cannon. The idea here was that at no point would anyone know whether what we were seeing from Brian Pillman was real or fake. And that wasn't just the audience who this applied to either. No, it was his co-workers as well. That's right, even those around him couldn't tell if the Cincinnati native was working them half of the time. Needless to say then, this was a huge
Bro, I could barely fucking hear him through this music.
departure from
What?
what he'd been doing previously, and it
What?
instantly made him one of the most talked about people.
Hopefully it goes away.
After all, who else was going to be able to work Eric Bischoff into giving him a legitimate release as what Eazy-E believed was part of a storyline, only for him to then take that release over to WWF to get a job there instead? And who else was making everyone around him question just what the hell was going on with his famous "I respect you, Booker Man" comment to Kevin Sullivan at Super Brawl 1996? No one, that's who. And this is why Brian Pillman felt like such a game changer at the time. Sure, he would never get to fully realize the character he had because by October of 1997, he'd be dead, but that doesn't mean the legacy of the loose cannon doesn't continue on today. No, whenever you see someone trying to blur that line on TV, as many people have done in the years, you can draw a direct line from what they're doing back to the antics of Brian Pillman back during the mid-90s. Really, if we want to talk about influence, then he's one of the more influential figures to hit the wrestling industry in decades.
Okay.
But does that make him better than our next
I was beating
subject?
up a pencil.
Someone who found a lot of success too after changing up his gimmick in the early 90s? Well, let's try to answer that question by looking at him now. Who are we talking about this time? Who else but
Guys, why is the music so loud?
Shawn Michaels, the man who started off as a rocker and who eventually became the Heartbreak Kid. That's right, Shawn Michaels was doing well for
Okay,
himself
thank
for
you. Thank you.
some time during his original gimmick. Hell, as one half of the Rock
Because I was cool not going to watch the rest of the video.
alongside Marty Jannetty, he was in one of the more popular tag team acts of his era, the WWF's version of the Rock and Roll Express, if there ever was one. But that original young babyface character was always going to take the Texans so far. And as the early 90s rolled around, he started to realize this, which was why it was then he'd make a big change. What was this big change? Well, the first step involved turning on his partner and throwing him right through the window of Brutus Beefcake's barbershop in a now iconic segment which took place in January of 1992. And after that, he'd morph into a much cooler, heelish version of himself, a ladies' man who went by the name of the Heartbreak Kid. Of course, you all know what happened next. HBK was able to take Shawn to levels he would have never reached before, as by the time 1996 came around, he was the WWF champion and the face of the entire company. Sure, he would be forced to enter temporary retirement a couple of years later as a result of a back injury, but in the end, that ended up being a blessing in disguise for the San Antonio native, as it allowed him the time he needed to clean up from his drug addiction. So when he was eventually cleared to return to the ring again in 2002, he was arguably even better than he had been before. Yes, like Daniel Bryan years later, Act 2 of Shawn Michaels' career saw him age like a fine wine. But then, a big part of the reason he was able to have enough longevity to reach this point was because he'd made that transformation into the Heartbreak Kid back in 1992, as it's hard to imagine the rocker version of him being a big deal into the 2000s and beyond. No, if Marty Jannetty's periodical cameo returns to wrestling have shown us anything, it's that this kind of gimmick has a very definitive shelf life, and that shelf life is one which ended somewhere around December 31st, 1989. So thank God Shawn was smart enough to realize this, as if he weren't still around for the eras which followed, the wrestling world would be a very different place, and that a lot of your favorite performers today would probably have never been inspired to lace up their boots themselves in the first place. Even NXT would be very different in 2025 without HBK there to run it, and that means the future of WWE going forward will look almost unrecognizable. But let's not talk about the future of WWE for now, and instead stick with the present, as it's there we find our next entry, a performer who has recently changed up her own gimmick and has found a second lease on life as a result of this, the one, the only, Naomi. Yes, throughout her time in WWE between 2012 and the present day, Naomi has usually been given a character which allows her plenty of TV.
I've seen a lot of you guys comment that she's one of your favorite wrestlers. So.
Hell, on multiple occasions, she'd even become a champion, twice in a singles capacity as a SmackDown Women's Champion, and twice in a duos capacity as a tag team champion alongside both Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair. That said, it's undeniable that as the 2020s rolled around, her character was beginning to wear out its welcome a little. So this was why she wisely decided to mix things up recently by switching to the dark side. How would she do this? Well, by turning on both of her former teammates, Belair and Jade Cargill, with the majority of the Florida natives' ire being saved for the latter. And while this could have been a pretty generic heel turn in the hands of a lesser performer, Naomi's promos after the fact were able to make the whole thing feel far more interesting than it could have been, and this has turned her into one of the more talked about acts on the SmackDown roster in 2025. So talked about has it made her, in fact, WWE recently pulled the trigger on giving her the Women's Money in the Bank contract. And with this contract now in her possession going forward, it means she's likely going to be a world champion again before long. The only question is, who will she cash in on? Tiffany Stratton or Io Sky? Or will she even surprise us by waiting a little bit longer until Jade Cargill has won one of the belts so that she can take it off of her? Whatever happens, the reality will be the same, and that reality is, with her new heel character, Naomi suddenly feels more refreshed and more relevant than she has in years. Really, at this point, we could see her being a top star in the division all over again heading into the latter half of the decade. Obviously, then it goes without saying that she probably would have never ascended to this spot again had she chosen to play it safe.
Didn't she, take a break for a little bit?
And remain in her old babyface incarnation.
Because I remember, like in the mid-2010s, she was there, and then, she wasn't there for a little bit.
But we guess that's just the power a great character refresh can have, as it can make what was old feel new all over again.
Damn. Yeah, there's a few that I've seen or know, which is Roman Reigns, Becky Lynch, Bray Wyatt, Shawn Michaels, and Naomi. But the other, I don't know. I don't know them. But yeah, thank you guys for suggesting this video. Pretty entertaining. I think there was a little editing error with the music, the background music. Other than that, pretty good video. And yeah, if you guys did enjoy this video, please give it a like, subscribe, and I'll see you all on the next one. Peace out.